Hi, my name's Jason. I'm an engagement manager for the Web Archive based at the British Library, but I work for the whole of the UK Web Archive, which is all of the legal deposit libraries in the UK. I usually like to start a talk with a straw poll of who, before looking at the programme, had ever heard that the UK had a Web Archive. Well, that's not bad, actually. You're clearly a very excellent audience. Usually I get maybe a third, sometimes less. Because the archiving of the internet at all is in its 20th anniversary year this year. Started in 1996. So what do we do at the UK Web Archive? Well, these days we try to save all of the UK web space. Millions of websites, probably something in the region of 4 to 10 million websites, depending on how that's defined. What we certainly do have is at least 2.2 billion items every single year. And the year just gone by, that was 80 terabytes of data. That's kind of every year. So in a kind of numbers sense, the British Library these days is a web archive with a small physical collection attached. So confusingly, for most people, and this is what makes my job quite a challenge in itself, is that there are kind of three sort of distinct collections. I'm not really going to go too much into depth with them now, but we have one. If you've ever heard of anything, you'll have heard of probably the Open UK Web Archive, which I'll touch on a bit later. We have a legal deposit web archive, which is kind of everything, and then we have a data set we acquired from the Internet Archive via our friends at JISC. There's stuff we don't do, so it's essentially anything private or not intended for public kind of view. So no email, no intranets, anything that's behind a user login, don't get any of that. So that's your Facebook, or at least your page on Facebook. If anyone remembers Flash, it was a big deal when I started out in sort of the early 2000s. Don't get any of that. And we don't get most video and audio content. We do get a fair bit by accident, but it's actually out of our remit to do that kind of stuff. And we definitely don't get kind of most of the stuff on YouTube. So you might be an above sympathetic crowd for why the hell we're doing this, but there's a very simple reason. It's Boris Johnson. But not him personally, I just want to make that clear. It's that websites disappear incredibly quickly, and this is Boris's website for when he was running for mayor back in 2008. Do you remember then? And this web address now comes back as a 404. So if you wanted to study Boris's career, including what he said he was going to do online, this is basically the only place you're going to find it. We also like to do the kind of big stuff. So a couple of years ago, the NHS had a massive reorganisation and kind of changed pretty much all of their websites. And we did a project to make sure that we collected all of those. This is the one from our friends at Humber, NHS Trust, I forget. But again, none of these websites kind of currently exist. The NHS ones are actually the ones on our Open UK Web Archive that are easily the most looked at. We think it's kind of mostly lawyers. Okay, so politics and government, but also culture is pretty important to us. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was an Anthony Gormley piece on the 4th plinth in Trafalgar Square, where 2,400 people took a turn at an hour each to, they did a variety of things. And Anthony Gormley himself was very keen that this be saved because it was going to be switched off. And the video rights were all with Sky Arts. It was very complicated, but with a bit of perseverance, we managed to save not only the website, but all of the videos as well. And I mentioned this because quite recently there was another project we were going to do where we got in touch with Sky Arts saying, have you got the videos for these, the originals? And they said, we can't find them. So this may be the only place you're going to see this project. I actually did one talk once where somebody who had been on it was delighted to know that it had been saved. Okay, so a very exciting graph, but it should illustrate with a bit of help, quite how ephemeral websites are. So if you look at to the right of this graph, there's the date 2013. So between 2014 and 2013, if you look at the dark blue bit, that's all that was kind of okay, hadn't moved, wasn't on a different server, and still existed. So that's about half. In a year, about half the websites that we recorded were okay. And if you go back in time, that trend gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and in 10 years, it's about 4%. It's essentially like having a collection. Well, it's not our collection, but the live web essentially burns down or moves house every 6 months to a year, and certainly every 2 years, pretty much hardly any websites have remained the same. So, it's pretty changeable stuff, and if no one's collecting it, we won't have it. So I think I've used this opportunity for this talk to kind of illustrate the challenges that we have and the things that I don't usually kind of talk about. One of the challenges from a curatorial point of view is how often do we take everything? So it'd be great to take everything every day, or at least look for stuff every day, maybe. But that from a space point of view, from a money point of view, it's kind of impossible. And from a technical point of view, I think that's probably impossible. But we do everything. We do the whole UK web space once per year currently. And that in itself takes about 3 months. We do other stuff selected by curators and other people more often, depending on how often we think that website's changing. And some stuff we do absolutely daily. So news is a kind of prominent one for daily crawls. So our friends at the BBC are a good example. And we would actually quite like to do it more than once per day. The journalists here have a big habit of changing their articles sometimes more than twice a day, often significantly, and we're working on sort of doing multiple day stuff for the BBC News and various other outlets. I think I made a bold claim at the beginning that we had everything, but it's not quite everything. So for storage issues, we cap websites at 500 megabytes, which is actually pretty generous. That gets the vast majority of websites are under 500 megabytes. And like I say earlier, we don't do a lot of the audio-visual stuff, so that kind of helps. But if a website is over that, then we haven't, for some reason, selected it as important, we don't get that extra stuff. If it's database-driven, if you come to a website and you get a search box and there's nothing else, well, that homepage is all we're going to get. By and large, there are ways around it, but normally we have to talk to the people who make the websites. And I guess the biggest thing that's kind of really obvious if you've ever kind of tried to look at web archives is they often don't really kind of look how they originally did. And a recent kind of dragon that has reared its head is our friends at WordPress, which I kind of read something recently that 25% possibly of all websites these days are a WordPress website. So this is what this website looks on the live web. It's sort of vaguely sort of fine. That's kind of very nice. And this is what we have. And if you scroll down, you get most of those images. These images do end up appearing on the page somewhere, but they're often quite far down. So broadly speaking, we're really good at text. Very good at text, hypertext at least, but usually not bad at kind of images that are in the page. Styling becomes a bit of an issue, and then various other things, depending on how the website was built. And WordPress gets stuff from all over the shop and only brings it together on the page at the last second, which makes it a nightmare for us. Okay, so we've got tons and tons of stuff. We've got tons and tons of stuff, and we're going to continue to get tons and tons of stuff over the years. But how are you going to go and look at it? So the Open UK Web Archive, that looks like that. only has about 15,000 websites on it. These are things that have been individually selected by and large, and more importantly, they required a license from the website owner. And in the early days, up until 2013, we needed a license to even crawl it. So that means we requested a lot of sites and then didn't get permission to actually get them. So that's kind of quite limited, small, niche collection, you could argue. And the irony is not lost on me at all that our website does slightly look like a website we've archived from 2005. So, but there is a project to change it, I assure you. Okay, so you've battled through to kind of to a reading room maybe, or it's on our Open UK Web Archive, and you need to find something. But currently, most of the time, you kind of need to know it's there. Which is fine. So I'd like to study the history of the British Library website. So I put in bl.uk, and that'd be fine, wouldn't it? Well, actually, before the first original British Library website was actually called Portico, and this is it. I think you'll agree it's a very fine-looking website. From 1996, of which I can't imagine there were that many people there to look at it. But if you didn't know that it was called Portico, if you're only looking at bl.uk, you may not find it. And likewise, other stuff, organisations change their name, they change their URL, and over time. So it's not necessarily straightforward, if you're looking for a history of even one website, to find a complete history. The other thing is we just got a lot of stuff. We got a lot of things. I mean, 2 billion items every single year. How do you find that kind of stuff? And any search that we give you just cannot work how you normally search online, which is, I'm guessing, Google. And it's because Google know a lot about you. They know who you are, what previous searches you've done. If this is news to you, I'm sorry. Probably your gender, your age, all these sort of things, and they use that to make relevance in the results, and that's pretty handy most of the time. But if you're a researcher doing your thesis or whatever, your research question is very likely to be something outside of what your private searching is likely to be. So relevance is kind of less useful, even if we could do it, even if we had the billions available to Google, which we don't. So this is an example of, if you go to the British Library, Explore the BL, it's our main sort of catalogue tool. And if you ever do this, incidentally, you put in any word, and under material type, there's something called archived websites, and you get a list. And I think I've put in what I imagine is the biggest hit, which I think is home, and that comes back with 387,000 returns, and that's only looking on the title. It's only looking at the title. There are other ways we can search all of the text on the website, but through this particular tool we can only do the title, which is, I don't know, how long would it, I think if you did a 1 page per second, and it definitely doesn't load 1 page per second, I don't know, you could be there for years. Okay, so our remit is to get the UK web space, so that's easy enough. So we get the .uk's and other stuff like .scot and .cymru and .wales, I think, and .london. So we've got all of those, but of course loads of websites about the UK and by people in the UK are not .uk's, they're something else. We are allowed to get stuff geographically on a server in the UK. That's something that gets about 2 million websites every year. But there's still loads, the internet doesn't have any borders. It's pretty common that, the websites to be hosted somewhere else, to be on .tv or .com, and we're just not getting that kind of stuff. Yeah, if you want to be work in a niche environment, come work for a web archive. This is the global web archive community. We think so. Some people who professionally are engineers who set up the web crawls, we reckon there's less than 10 in the whole world. There's probably less than 200 people at all working in the web archive in the world. BL team is 8 people, and we think that's easily the biggest team in a national museum. something that I was wondering whether it was going to come up under contemporary collecting and hasn't particularly come up so much is in the days when we had to select websites and ask for permission, does that mean we're endorsing it? And I kind of hope that this is the sort of community that will see that it isn't endorsement. But we did have to ask permission of the BNP to archive their website. We think it's as much as hopefully I can make a political statement of I don't particularly believe in their views. And if you read their website, it's often pretty ridiculous. But they gave us permission, and we archive it, and we think it's an important part of the collection of talking about politics in the UK. But we've always tried to be keen to make sure that this doesn't mean endorsement. Don't think I've got time to show you, but we that third collection, the one that we acquired from the Internet Archive bought by our friends from JISC, spans 17 years of .uk domains that the Internet Archive saved. And this web address, it's worth a look. This is a live link. You can go and have a look at it now. It shows you where we would like to be with our own collections. It kind of you can do some pretty interesting trending. So if you always wondered whether cats or dogs were more popular or best, it's cats. 2005 is peak cat there, as we call it. And on a more serious note, here we've got the word terrorism, IRA, and Al Qaeda. And you can see IRA and terrorism were fairly similar up to the Good Friday Agreement in 2000, and then 9/11 happened, and suddenly the word terrorism appeared on the internet considerably more. It never really went down to its old levels. I'm reasonably, Al Qaeda barely existed at all until 9/11, and then even then it's still less popular than the IRA. I'm not sure what that tells you. But you can use the trending in some pretty interesting ways. And you get quite an interesting search here. I think, again, I'm going to use my favourite of home to illustrate what I think is the biggest return on one word on the internet. This search engine looks at every single word of every single website in this collection, which is about 3.5 billion items over 17 years. So how do you, if that's your search, how do you filter that? Well, we've got some facets down the side here, including some interesting ones like postcode and date and various other things. So you can get it down, and then there's a download the subset of that collection as a CSV and have a play with it at home. So this is live if you want to go and have a look at it. Is it true that all Manchester United fans don't live in Manchester? So we tried that, and then the top score of postcode for Manchester United is in fact E98, which I'm sure all you London people would know is the home of News International. So it's the Sun talking about Manchester United mostly. But the second one is East 1, so and Manchester is only third. Sorry, Manchester. So I'll just kind of finish with, probably an obvious statement, but if you were to tell the history of our times, it would be quite hard to do it without really the study of the internet, and hopefully in support of what many of my colleagues are doing in these other places. But we think this is really important, but I don't think its true importance has really kind of hit home, and it probably won't do possibly for, 10, 20 years, and then everyone's going to demand, what did you do? Thank you.